Yeah. There's a couple of ideas there actually. And I know I've heard the name a lot and I've met him in passing and but I've never like sat down and had a conversation. Yeah. 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 I mean, I think that'll all be the.
I mean, you're gonna be here 30 years. We don't want somebody, you know, finding a way. As a system forever.
There's no upward mobility in this place.
No, I need a power boot. It takes a morphodite cable. One of these days, we're gonna get new tablets, right? And I'll ask you. So I won't read it off that. So I'm gonna just write, I won't make a mention of it.
Sure. Thinking about going through another meeting.
If I don't have that, it's hard to.
You're going senile.
Yes, dear.
Oh.
Yes, dear.
Where's she going? What's going on around here?
Tim's distracting her.
What?
Welcome, everybody, to the April 14th, 2025 City Council meeting. I'd like to ask our city clerk to please call the roll.
Counselor Ring,
Here.
Counselor McLaughlin,
Here.
Counselor Runyon,
Was it?
Counselor Randall,
Present.
Counselor Richardson,
Present.
Mayor Mace.
Here. Item 3 is Pledge of Allegiance. I'd like to ask our city councilor, Tim McLaughlin, to please lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Excellent job, Counselor.
Uh-huh.
Item 4 is approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I move we approve the agenda.
I'll second it.
It's been moved by Counselor Richardson and seconded by Counselor Randall to approve the agenda. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 5 is audience participation. Apparently, we have one. Do I have to read this thing for Lisa? Okay, Lisa, during this portion of the meeting, anyone may speak on any subject which does not later appear on the agenda. Up to 3 minutes per person will be allowed. Citizens are encouraged to ask questions with the understanding that the city can either answer the question tonight or refer that question to the appropriate staff member who will get back to you within a reasonable amount of time. If a response by the city is requested, the speaker will be referred by the city manager for further action. The issue may appear on a future meeting agenda for city council consideration. Please identify yourself for the record and use the microphone.
Lisa Farquharson with the Dalles Chamber in just one moment.
Well. Is this over $15?
$50.
Was it now 50? Amendment, let's see,
De minimis value.
minimus.
Thank you.
No way, man. Those are seriously good.
Thank you, Lisa. Oh, boy.
Thank you.
I have one for you.
Thank you, hon.
Whoops, I just knocked on it.
But not talk before.
All right.
So as you know, there's a little event next week that we like to call Northwest Cherry Festival. So I just wanted to remind you as city councilors in our city and making sure that our public knows it is the 25th through the 27th. You have hot off the press posters that just talk about it. So please hang them up, share the information. We have a ton of stuff happening again this year, but we still have room in the parade. We still have room at the community fair, which is on Saturday, where nonprofits can come for free. That is sponsored so that they don't have to pay anything. We still have room in the parade. I promised our chief back here we would keep it to a certain number. I'm holding to that for safety reasons. And then you can always vote for your little royals right now until the 21st. It's all on the Northwest Cherry Festival. But we also have room for our businesses to still sign up for the Cherry Trail, which is getting people to use an app and go into their business and do commerce in our brick and mortars. And then we still have room for our businesses to sign up for the window decorating contest. Again, that's getting people to rotate through our community, come to the window, or they'll vote on the app. But it's getting awareness for our businesses during a time that we have a big open air market. We still want to make sure that we're doing commerce with our brick and mortar. So everything is on northwestcherryfestival.com. Any questions?
No.
Thanks. It's quite the endeavor. We have a lot of sponsors. And so we hope to see all of you. I know that we have the mayor signed up for the parade. Do we have any other city councilors? Yes. Okay. Look at that.
Yeah, we have Counselor Randall and Counselor McLaughlin. And
Okay.
the other three are certainly encouraged to sign up with
We'll
the
put you in the
mayor
car.
and ride with us.
Yep. So just
But-
no throwing candy.
But you have any marching bands?
We have one.
Okay,
I think it's the high school. They signed up just this last week.
good.
So we do have a marching band, Mr. McLaughlin. So yeah. It's not a parade unless you have one. So that is what's happening. If you have any other questions, just holler. Like I said, there is a ton of things happening that are all over town throughout the entire weekend. We hope that you encourage other people to participate as this does support our community in several different ways. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You have a question?
I can't find it.
Okay. Moving right along, city manager's report, Mr. Klebs.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A few updates for you in general over the last couple weeks, but also touching upon a few items in our goal and action plan document. Under goal 1, livability, a couple of the projects or deliverables we've been focused on is making progress on the Federal Street Plaza, which I believe a couple city councilors may update everybody on this evening during their report, and expect to have a presentation and action item for the council at the April 28th meeting. We've been updating our animal control ordinances as we see on the agenda this evening. And we've been seeing, knock on wood, but stronger and more consistent staffing at the police department, which is of great benefit. I've also wanted to update council. I intend to direct staff to delay the implementation of a formation of an ad hoc committee to work on the sign code to accommodate a surge in planning department applications and some staffing transitions that we're having down there. Certainly not putting that aside or not intending to continue work on that effort, but just managing the workload and bandwidth that we have available. And then the final update is also at the next meeting, we'll have an action item on the CAD RMS project associated with the 911 dispatch center for the April 28th meeting. Goal 2 was housing. We've adopted the HPS, the housing production strategies, and it's pending implementation of several of its strategies. And there's been some preliminary exploration work of the multi-unit property tax exemption or MUPD program, which is similar in ways to the vertical housing zone tax credit program that we have. This deliverable will be assisted by the new EDO as we finalize that recruitment process and bring them on board. Goal 3, houselessness. As the council knows, we've resolved the litigation that we had ongoing with St. Vincent de Paul, and we've been responding to camps and shopping cart complaints. I'm seeking to set up a meeting or a new meet and greet with the new executive director for Mid-Columbia Community Action Council and build that relationship. And I also actually participated in an interview for a video segment put out through the governor's office on the Gloria Center and the support that the governor's office provided to that facility and the city's role in financially supporting that facility and assisting them with an Oregon Department of Energy grant to put solar panels on top of the building. Goal 4, fiscal sustainability. We have our upcoming budget meetings starting on May 5th. This budget that you will see before you and before the budget committee follows recent council action to provide budgetary guidance on the use of strategic investment program dollars from the new Google data centers under construction and affirm some of the guiding philosophies that we've used in years past to guide that budget, including a 10% contingency, an unappropriated ending fund balance equal to 4 months operating, and in addition to some changes brought on by ordinances over the past year, one of the ones that comes to mind is the transient lodging tax ordinance. Goal 5 on infrastructure. The wastewater master plan effort is moving forward. We have a more robust
capital improvement plan for city-owned facilities. And the Sixth Street feasibility study work will begin this fall, I believe. That's still the target timeframe for that. Goal 6, public relations. Our digitization project is nearing completion. We have a new What's Happening at City Hall video series spearheaded by Amy L., our city clerk, along with a new Instagram account. And we have implemented new ClearGov budget book software for this year's budget cycle. That process was spearheaded by Angie Wilson, the former finance director. I'm excited to unveil the product from that new software at the budget meetings in May. One addition I wanted to make note of is we had a very positive and productive work session with Klickitat County, with the Columbia Gorge Regional Airport, and received direction to prioritize reviewing and revising the joint operating agreement that we have within the next 6-month timeline. So in a similar kind of management of competing priorities and bandwidth, I intend to prioritize that effort over comprehensively reviewing the franchise agreements and ordinances and the structure in which the city entertains and enters into those franchise agreements. That's something the city attorney and I have been working on, and I'm just indicating to council how we're managing the large workload that we have here. So just wanted to provide a few updates on the goal and action plan. In addition to that, the Forest Legacy Program funding for the city's watershed acquisition from Lupine Forest will be awarded later this fall. I appeared on KODL, where we had a very robust discussion around the tourism services contract. And again, we expect a recommendation from the ad hoc committee at the early May meeting. I hosted a meeting with the governor's regional solutions team and agency partners, along with some federal office representation to talk about some of the priorities and projects of the city. That was facilitated by Nate Stice out of the governor's office. Had a presentation to Rotary. I attended Northern Wasco County PUD's leadership team with the objective of observing all operations and staff culture and environment in another partner organization and how they approach conducting their business and the tools and techniques that they use to bring back to the city. We're moving forward and finalizing candidates for the Assistant City Manager HR Director position, the Finance Director position, and the Economic Development Officer positions. And I wanted to say congratulations to David Mills as our new Deputy Public Works Director. And again, thank Dale McCabe for stepping up into the role as the Public Works Director. I think they're both drinking from a fire hose, but they are certainly up to the challenge. And it's always great to be able to see that kind of staff growth and promotion from within. And so just want to thank the both of them for stepping up. One of the impacts of that, though, is we're now recruiting for the Transportation Division Manager position and a few others out at Public Works. And I also wanted to make note and thank Tyler Mitchell as well, who stepped up in a similar fashion at our water treatment plant. And I think those are the updates, snapshot on goals and actions of the City Council and what happened over the last couple weeks. Be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions for the city manager? Okay, thank you very much. Item 7 is city council reports. We'll start on my left with Council Runyon.
A few things going on the 25th of March, along with the mayor and city manager attended the community outreach team meeting. On the 28th, the retirement party for our economic development director, Dan Spots. And on the 29th, the Vietnam War Veterans Memorial at Kelly Viewpoint, well attended. On April 1st, an Oregon government ethics seminar. On the 3rd of April, Quality Life Internet meeting was held at the PUD. And on the 3rd of April, City Council and Klickitat County Commissioners joint work session at the Dallesport Washington Airport. And April 4th, I met with Councilor Ben Ring, just getting to know each other a little bit, and a very, very good lunch. April 10th, Gorge Transit Summit in Hood River, which was well attended. April 13th, a tour of the juvenile detention facility at Norcor. And today, earlier, Mid-Columbia Veterans Memorial Committee meeting held at the new Veteran Service Office at 401 East 3rd. If you haven't been by there, Chelsea Parrott and Russ Jones would be glad to give you a tour. two people doing an excellent job for veterans in Wasco County and across the river as well.
Counselor Richardson?
Thanks, Mr. Mays. Mayor Mays, I want to report mostly on one thing tonight with Councilor Ring's blessing, I hope. I want to report on recent development of our Federal Street Plaza project. After a number of months and a good deal of outreach, we have the ad hoc committee, I should say, voted for recommending a plaza concept plan that is ready to move forward. The next steps will be a presentation, as City Manager Klebs mentioned, later this month. Obviously, if you have questions prior to that, you could speak with me or the mayor or with Councilor Ring. Then we will include, should that be accepted by the whole council, I hope that it is. It's a worthy project. It'll be included in our budget. And if that is passed and all goes well, we will then build it next spring. So the project has been in the works for, or rather in people's minds for a number of years. It's been in the works for a goodly number of months. I want to commend what I felt was really excellent committee work by our volunteers and members of the committee. There was a lot of give and take. Nobody dominated or got everything they wanted, but I felt all were able to contribute in a meaningful way. There's a lot of features that this little plaza would have for people and really create what we have called among ourselves the Dalles living room, but just a place that would be multifunctional for young and old alike. And pretty excited about it. And I hope that you all on the council give it serious due consideration and hope that you find that it's a worthy project and we can move it forward. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Counselor Randall?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also attended the retirement celebration for Dan Spots at the Bargeway Pub. April 3rd, I also attended the joint work session with Clickett County Commissioners. And on April 1st, I attended the local public safety coordinating committee. And that's it.
Counselor Ring?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On the 9th of April, I was at the Plaza Committee meeting, that ad hoc committee that Councilor Richardson just mentioned. Prior to that, I met with Councilor Runyon just to catch up and get to know each other since I'm still new. And prior to that, Mayor Mays had the coffee with the mayor on the 29th of March, and I was there for most of that. Thanks.
Thank you. Counselor McLaughlin?
Last Friday, I attended a Zoom meeting for Oregon State Chamber of Commerce. They discussed many items affecting chambers across the state, but the one that struck me the most was HB House Bill 3556, using TLT monies for non-tourism items, and that appears to be dead. I went to Dan Spott's retirement party. It was a wonderful evening. Clickett County, I did attend the joint session. Tomorrow, KODL with the mayor. And Friday, it looks like airport, or coming up is the airport commission for this month. And that's my report.
Thank you. As far as my report goes, in addition to the aforementioned retirement dinner or celebration, the airport meeting, the Federal Street Plaza meeting, and the community outreach meeting, I also did an interview with Mark Bailey on KACI on the 25th of March. I met with Kate Franco of Google the same day, had a nice meeting with her, took the training on the 26th for the Oregon Ethics Commission. I made a presentation to Community Affairs Committee of the Chamber. Actually, I made that presentation the week before that. Actually, I attended because Representative Jeff Helfrich was a speaker, so I did attend that. Made a presentation to the Dalles Lions Club on April 1st. April 4th, I attended a Yard of the Month celebration on Garrison Street. And on April 9th, I attended a meeting with Brianna Irish, who is a representative of Senator Ron Wyden's office. In conclusion, I would like the city council, after our executive session, I would like to have the city council stick around, still in open session. I have numerous forms to hand out regarding the upcoming evaluation meetings we will be having a week from today on April 21st at 10 o'clock. So I have many forms here to hand out regarding our 3 contractual employees. So please indulge me, stick around and after the executive session for about 5 minutes, and I'll be handing these out. And that concludes my report. Item 8 is the consent agenda. Items of a routine and non-controversial nature are placed on the consent agenda to allow the city council to spend its time and energy on the more important items and issues. Any councilor may request an item be pulled from the consent agenda and be considered separately. Items pulled from the consent agenda will be placed on the agenda at the end of the action, at the end of the action items section. We have 3 items on tonight's consent agenda. First is approval of the March 24th City Council meeting minutes. Second is a resolution concurring with my appointment of Jan Oldenburg and Eric Leeson to the Fort Dalles Museum Commission. And third is authorizing the purchase of materials for the Wicks water treatment plant. I will say that I believe our city clerk has a comment on a correction we need to make on the approval of the March 24th meeting minutes. And we also have a correction on the resolution number in item B. It should be 25-017, not 016. I believe the ordinance does have the right number on there, or the resolution. So would you like to talk about that correction,
Sure.
Amy?
On page 7 of your packet, which is page 5 of the minutes, the second to the last paragraph, the second sentence. Want me to pause there for a minute? The word "not" should be removed. So it will read, the paragraph started with Runyon. Second sentence will now say he had asked for a provision stating that if a person had 2 horses and one died, they could replace it. And he gave the example that if someone currently had 2 horses and one died, they should be able to replace the one that had passed, just to clarify that.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as corrected?
Make a motion to pass the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
McLaughlin will second.
It's been moved by Councilor Ring and seconded by Councilor McLaughlin to approve the consent agenda as amended. Is there any more discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 9A is consideration of an ordinance amending our municipal code in relation to overnight parking in the city-owned parking lots. Mr. Kara.
Thank you, Mayor Mays. Here we're talking about a general ordinance to amend the Dalles Municipal Code, Chapter 602. This is, by and large, some housekeeping. Council might recall a few years ago, the city implemented an ordinance establishing a portion of our code that allows people to, certain people that either work, live, or own a business in the city's downtown to come to this city hall and apply for a permit to park their vehicles there overnight in the certain city-owned parking lots. And there are a few different of those parking lots. Tonight's housekeeping ordinance is basically 3 different changes. The first is adding in prohibitions for giving out those kinds of permits for what's known as heavy equipment. Heavy equipment includes, construction equipment, small caterpillars, things of that nature. It would be removing the ability to get a permit for what's known as oversized vehicles. Those are vehicles exceeding 22 feet in length, generally, and there are some other width and height dimensions that might also be triggered. And there is also a prohibition now on trailers, which are vehicles that don't have their own motive power and that are designed to be drawn by another vehicle. So that's the first change. It is three added prohibitions so that no longer will there be permits allowed for these overnight parking in city-owned parking lots for heavy equipment, oversized vehicles, and trailers. The intent here really is to just facilitate the parking of so-called, normal vehicles, cars, sedans, trucks of that, pickup trucks. That would be fine. The second change is to add some authority for the city manager to make some permit revocations. Currently, the city manager, the way we implemented this ordinance at the time, sort of has a limited authority to revoke these permits once they're issued. The proposed changes here tonight are to add the city manager's ability to revoke a permit if vehicles park in directions that are not labeled. So if somebody's parking facing the street, but they should be parking facing the inside of the parking lot, for example, or not completely within a parking space. And there are due process appeals that are included in the ordinance if somebody feels aggrieved by a decision of the city in denying a permit or revoking a permit. And that leads us to the third change, which is in alignment with some of the other ordinances that have recently been considered by council, trying to shift appeals from these decisions instead of being heard by the city council to being heard by the city's municipal judge in municipal court. And so those are the three quick housekeeping changes for this ordinance. The motion language is on page 22 of 41 in your staff report. Of course, more than happy to answer any questions.
Is there anyone in the audience who would like to comment on this? Okay, city council questions for Mr. Kara? Councilor Runyon?
In number one of the three items,
You pull your mic in, please.
number one of the three items, the last sentence. The proposed amendment prohibits heavy equipment, oversized vehicles, and trailers. Did you mean and commercial trailers there? Or trailers found with commercial equipment?
Yeah, so
Go
I
ahead.
can give you the exact definition. It's included. So the definition is included in the actual draft, well, the draft proposed ordinance, and it refers to a different section of our code,
Yeah.
which deals with parking. It's under chapter 6.04, traffic control. And the city has previously defined trailer, and this is the definition we're hoping to include here, as meaning any vehicle without motive power designed to be drawn by another vehicle. And there are 11 examples, and I can just read them very quickly. There's 11 examples that this is what the word trailer includes. It's not limited to this, but this is what it includes. And I don't know what some of these are, frankly. I'll just be candid. Balance trailers, bus trailers, commercial bus trailers, farm trailers, pole trailers, semi-trailers, travel trailers, truck trailers, self-supporting trailers, special use trailers, and flatbed or utility trailers.
So the question really is, you're in the actual statute, you feel it's clear, where here in the summary sent to us, it didn't list commercial. So I could take that as an RV trailer too. And maybe unattached trailers of any kind should be, on that list. I don't know.
What was the type of trailer that you just referenced?
Well, when you wrote it the way you did on our summary here, it said and trailers, oversized vehicles, and trailers. Well, trailers could be there by themselves, but I think you're referring to commercial trailers. And you're saying that in the actual statute, it is definitely defining commercial trailers?
Yes.
Okay, then I'm good. That was just our thing for our reading, and it was missing a word.
So just so I'm clear, because I just want to be 100% honest, I don't know what a commercial trailer is.
Well, an oversized vehicle would be a commercial vehicle 9 times out of 10, based on having a permit and so forth to carry heavy equipment or other items. But you're talking about the trailer that goes with that truck sometimes, or one that's left there. If they're commercial trailers, i.e. they have a permit for the type and size they are, that's commercial. No,
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. I think the intent with the way that the direction I received was given was to avoid any kind of trailer for the most part. Anything that is typically drawn behind a vehicle that doesn't have its own engine. And if that's a commercial trailer, then I think that a commercial trailer is a type of trailer that would be included in the prohibition, but it's certainly not the only kind of trailer. I think it would be anything that would be drawn behind a vehicle.
so then, but the statute you think is correct, but the summary that was given to us is missing some words, and is what you're saying.
I think in the ordinance itself, it references the provision that Jonathan is mentioning, and then that ties it to the definition he shared.
Yeah.
So the staff report has that basic summary that says trailers, but in the ordinance itself, I think it
refers
captures all
yeah.
of them.
Yeah, it
I
captures
just want us to have an ordinance to be clear, maybe both, commercial trailers and example, RV trailers or other trailers are prohibited without.
Correct. That's the intent there.
Yeah. Thank you.
and frankly, that intent is sort of bolstered by the change in number 2, which gives basically prohibits people from not fitting completely within a parking space. And so I think the idea here is if you can't fit your vehicle or trailer or vehicle and trailer, I guess, completely within a designated parking space, that would be grounds for the city manager to be able to revoke your permit.
An example of that is we've had people crossing the parking lengthwise across multiple spaces, and we want to make sure that they're following the
Well,
layout of the parking lots.
It only sticks out to me because I work in that field and, I just want us to be clear. If we also mean other kinds of trailers, I think it should be defined, as commercial trailers and or RV trailers, all trailers.
Okay, I hear what you're saying. The ordinance itself, not the ASR, but the ordinance definitely clearly defines it. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions for the staff?
Yeah, one brief question. Is this ordinance proposed to solve a problem, perhaps like when you've suggested, or are we leading the issue a bit, trying to get ahead of one?
I think the timing of this ordinance, I'll let the city manager jump into with maybe some practical examples, but the timing of this ordinance, we wanted to bring it to council before July 1st. On July 1st, it's sort of the new season of permits that would be issued. And so in this past year, we've, sometimes issues have popped up and we were hoping to address on a case-by-case basis. And we had an opportunity to sort of holistically address the issues in this chapter by making these changes. And so there are certain examples, I believe, and Matthew can definitely speak on some of them.
Certainly, I can provide you some examples. We had a number of different instances where a trailer received a permit and was parked down there, or we've had vehicles parked across the lines that are down there, and it was a bit restricted in revoking some of those permits or addressing them, or they were issued without this clarity. And so the city attorney is exactly right, before July 1st, and it also wasn't a critical nature. And so we have a couple of these in our pocket that we save for agendas that are a little lighter that we can get in. Again, trying to manage the long council meetings we sometimes have.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
And just for the record as well, none of those instances resulted in any sort of enforcement, and those people that were issued permits for their trailers, if they still have those permits. And so we just wanted to address it before we had to do another year of it.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Ring.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One quick question. One thing that I wanted to make sure was still in here, if we're having active projects, we have, the plazas coming up potentially next year, First Street. It's going to be a series of efforts after that. I would imagine that there would be some sort of exemption or permitting process for some of the commercial vehicles that would be parked there long term.
Parked there long term?
Yeah. Like while you're replacing like the water main on First Street or.
Oh, sure. There are certainly exceptions baked into this ordinance already. So tonight's ordinance, let me be very clear. Tonight's ordinance just has these minor little changes, but the actual chapter 6.02 has exceptions. City vehicles are accepted, of course. And there are other exceptions as well.
Thank you.
One to speak of is that these permits apply to parking lots that are appropriately posted.
Mhm.
And so if we needed that flexibility in those parking lots to accommodate these projects, it would be a relatively simple matter of taking the signs down temporarily to kind of free up the flexibility and then putting them back up later.
Any other questions? Look, anybody like to make a motion?
I certainly would, Mayor Mays. May I move to adopt General Ordinance number 25-1413 as presented by title only?
I will second.
Moved by Counselor McLaughlin and seconded by Counselor Ring to approve this ordinance by title only. Is there anyone who would like to hear the city clerk read the entire ordinance in its entirety, the whole thing?
No.
I take it everybody agrees with Counselor McLaughlin. Okay, let the record show that no one is objecting. So will you please read it by title only?
General Ordinance number 25-1413, an ordinance amending certain provisions of the Dalles Municipal Code, Chapter 6.02, overnight parking in city-owned parking lots.
All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mayor Mays.
Thank you. Item 9B is a consideration of an ordinance amending our municipal code in relation to fireworks. Mr. Klebs.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As the council knows, you provided myself and staff direction in regards to this general ordinance regarding fireworks. In short summary, this really mirrors action that council has taken in prior years regarding fireworks regulations and the declaration of a local state of emergency due to certain conditions. It restricts the personal use of fireworks, but still allows the sale and commercial display of fireworks. And the primary distinction here is that it kind of presets up these measures to be taken upon reaching certain triggers. And so that would be the state of Oregon declaring a drought or other emergency relating to fire dangers that exist within Wasco County, or Wasco County itself prohibits the use of fireworks within its geographic boundaries. We still retain the authority to proactively take action as the council wishes. But if we have conditions get to a point that causes one of these triggers to move forward, it allows us to put these restrictions in place in a very timely manner without having to call a special session of city council if we were close to the 4th of July example. And so this is something that we've talked about for a number of years here, last 4 or 5 years. Each year we've taken this action, and we're kind of responding to that annual event by preloading some of these things in place with a particular trigger. So that's really it in essence, based on the direction from council, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions for the city manager? Counselor Ring?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm curious, when one of these triggers with the state or county prohibiting the use of fireworks, how are we going to notify people?
So we have a lovely new evolved position here as our public information officer. And Amy has been working on some of the different communication plans that we have here. I would imagine that we would have a banner on the website. We'd have Facebook posts, a press release, something to include potentially in a what's happening at City Hall event if of timely nature. Those are typically the ways we've pushed it out in years past. Am I missing any, Amy?
Our Public Works Department usually puts a sign up on the end of
Yeah.
town, both
Right.
ends of town.
A 6th Street, yeah.
Lets everybody know as well.
Electronic reader boards. Those have typically been the methods.
We also have a provision in the ordinance in section 722.030B, commanding really the city manager to promptly following the conclusion of the state of emergency, to publicize that conclusion conspicuously on our website, social media accounts, and any other means reasonably calculated to provide actual notice to the general public. So there's some built-in safeguards there.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Well, like the city manager said, we've talked about this many times. And I guess at this point, ready to entertain anyone wanting to make a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move to adopt General Ordinance number 25-1412 by title only as presented.
I'll second.
Been moved by Council Randall and seconded by Council Richardson to adopt the general ordinance by title only. Is there anyone here who would like to have the city clerk read the ordinance in its entirety? I hear nothing but silence. So will the city clerk please read the ordinance by title only?
General Ordinance number 25-1412, an ordinance amending the Dalles Municipal Code Title 7 Public Protection by creating the Dalles Municipal Code Chapter 7.22 Fireworks.
All those in favor of the ordinance, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Item 9C, consideration of proposed wage and cost of living adjustments. Mr. Klebs.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to Nick DeLeon and our Finance Department for assisting on this item this evening. I'll kind of break this down in two parts. Annually, we have a routine process here where we come to council for authorization on cost of living adjustments. We have two unions here, the police union and the SEIU union, and in those collective bargaining agreements or CBAs, it details how and what manner we base the annual cost of living adjustments. For the SEIU union, this is based on the Western CPI through January 2025 and is restricted within a range of 1% to 5%. And typically we use that same procedure and apply it to exempt staff as well. And so the COLA for this year is 3%. As I mentioned, that will be applied, authorized through the SEIU CBA. I'm looking for approval from council to apply that same COLA increase to our exempt staff. The other element in this staff report is an ongoing process and effort to recruit and retain top talent. And with some of the increasing challenges that we have with recruitment and retention, we asked for the assistance from a consultant called HR Answers to gather some compensation data for us to help have an informed process with making potential wage table adjustments. Typically, the philosophy I've employed here is to look at compensation holistically, kind of from top to bottom on a 3-year cycle. And this evening, we're looking at a couple adjustments, I guess you could say mid-year cycle, because of some of these concerns with recruitment and retention to help us be more competitive, and how some of the newer positions we have at the city here have been playing out. And so with the data from HR Answers and included in your packet, we have 2 revised wage tables. One is for SEIU, which makes adjustments to the equipment operator and equipment operator Cert 2 positions, as well as the certified operator for water and sewer from the initial step all the way up to certified operator 4. These proposals incorporate the 3% adjustment that I mentioned a moment ago, and for the equipment operator positions gives an additional 4% increase to be more competitive. And then for the certified operators, it's an additional 2% for a total of 5 to adjust those positions there. On the exempt pay table, we made some changes again with the facility supervisor to better reflect the duties and the on-call nature of the position, as well as some changes to the associate planner, project development manager, assistant planner, and planning technician. These positions all, in essence, moved up 1 grade on the pay table, except for the facility supervisor, which moved up 3, I believe. And again, incorporates that 3% increase across the board, plus an additional percentage increase to better position the city for recruitment and retainment. Also working with the library director, one of the positions, the programming and outreach coordinator position at the library, has been proposed to evolve into an assistant library director, which is something that the city has had previous. And there's an opportunity to bring that back and better support the staff at the library. That's been placed at the MG8 level on the exempt pay table. So again, we're only looking at the exempt wage table and the SEIU wage table. We recently adopted the police union CBA, so that our collective bargaining agreement. So that should be ready to go forward. And again, the upcoming budget proposed for early May incorporates these potential changes. And I'm just looking for your approval so we can move forward. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions for the city manager? I have one. What is the, could you explain the significance of the first column of the non-union wage table, which is on page 36? On the far left, you've got, starting with DH1, which I assume means department head, going all the way down to MG, and then you have OP. If you could explain the difference.
Yep. So these classifications are different grades for each position. You're exactly right. Department head DH stands for department head. And my apologies, Mr. Mayor, I may get the other ones wrong. I think MG is manager, OP is
Operator.
office personnel, perhaps, and SP might be specialist. This nomenclature was adopted, several years ago, and doesn't have any particular meaning other than to designate the particular pay grades.
Any other questions? Looking for a motion.
Move to approve the fiscal year 2025-2026 non-union wage and SEIU tables as presented effective July 1st, 2025.
Is there a second?
McLaughlin will second.
Moved by Counselor Ring and seconded by Counselor McLaughlin to approve the 2025-26 wage and cost of living adjustments. Any discussion or any other questions?
Mr. Mayor,
Counselor Runyon.
Mr. City Manager, could you explain that again? You said it was adopted a few years ago, the nomenclature. I was lost there. Is there a name that should be retitled or a position that should be retitled?
No, the individual pay grades is simply a structure for how we've labeled each pay grade. And so if you wanted to refer to a particular pay range, you could refer to it as MG2 or DH4 or OP4. It's just the label associated with that pay range. So nothing really needs to be updated, in particular at this time, with that structure. However, one thing I mentioned earlier, it's the intention here that every 3 years on a given cycle to kind of holistically look at these pay tables from top to bottom. And that's something that we intend to look at next year. This structure and naming convention is something we could review, but I think it kind of serves its purpose to identify which pay grade someone may be talking about rather than referring to the position.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Item 10A is a discussion on proposed amendments to our dog control ordinance. This is a discussion item only. Mr. Klebs or Mr. Kara? Mr. Klebs.
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As the council knows, this was identified on our council goal and action plan, and also builds upon several constituent contacts and emails that I've been receiving over the past few years, encouraging the city to conduct a review of the dog control ordinance that we have, in addition to staff feedback and actual implementation of some of the ordinance that we have, and some efficiencies and improvements that could be made. We have the animal control officer here this evening, Jake, along with Sunny Simon online, who is with the Columbia Gorge Humane Society. And this builds upon the livestock discussion and recent ordinance that we adopted not too long ago. And we're approaching it in a similar manner, where we present general changes or topics for the council and the community to consider in a discussion item. It allows questions to be asked, gives individuals time to process what some of these things may mean, and gives an opportunity for council to direct staff on making refinements and bringing back a final ordinance for potential adoption. And so with that introduction, I'll turn it over to the city attorney to go through the particulars I think the only other thing I will add is that Wasco County also reviewed their dog ordinance late last fall and winter. And so that was part of this overarching process, and really focusing on a couple key areas with leash laws and licensing, things that have been topics of discussion in this community for quite some time. And with our review of the livestock ordinance, the county's review of their ordinance, and the evolution of Home at Last into the Columbia Gorge Humane Society, seems to be a good time to be having this discussion. Jonathan?
Yeah. You might notice, council might notice, tonight's discussion item doesn't have a proposed red line. We just wanted to sort of key in and get council's input on what to prepare to bring back to you all. I don't know if I want to put a time on it, but maybe June,
Earliest.
optimistically, yes. Maybe late May, I don't know.
The only reason I mentioned that is there's not a second council meeting in May, and we have the budget meetings
That's
in May
right.
as well. So
That's right.
be a tight turnaround for April.
Yeah. With that said, there are at least 5 areas that I know personally I'd appreciate some council specific direction on, and they're all listed in your staff report starting on page 38. Starting with number 1, a leash law. I'd like to go ahead and invite our animal control officer, Jake Baker, just to come on up in case council has any specific questions. And given Jake's experience, I think he would absolutely be in the best position to answer many of the substantive questions council might have. The city does not currently have a leash law. We have a control law. The city does not define what control really means. And so tonight, we're hoping for council's direction on whether and to what extent we should include a leash requirement in the proposed amendments. I listed here some common arguments opposing and supporting leash laws. Common arguments opposing leash requirements typically include that they're seen as a form of government overreach and perhaps an unnecessary restriction on otherwise responsible pet owners. Some argue that leashes can limit a dog's ability to exercise and socialize if there are no designated off-leash areas. And some communities have dog parks or designated off-leash areas. And some communities swear by electric collars, which are mostly used for training purposes, but they can be an effective alternative. Some common arguments supporting leash laws typically include that they tend to reduce the risk of dog bites or attacks on people, other dogs, and animals, and mitigate against the risk of dogs running into traffic and causing accidents or injury. That they help prevent dogs from chasing wildlife, livestock, or becoming lost. Administratively, it's commonly seen that having a leash law in a city, having a clear leash law makes it certainly easier for the city's animal control officer to enforce dog licensing and vaccination requirements. And that they tend to help reassure people who are fearful or uncomfortable around dogs and tend to prevent dogs from jumping on or frightening people who may not be able to react quickly, like children or elderly persons. None of these are unique to the Dalles. These are common arguments, both for and against leash laws throughout the United States, probably throughout the world. And if council supports a leash law, we can prepare amendments to the ordinance with some exceptions. Commonly, those exceptions include not requiring a leash when dogs are within the bounds of a lawfully established off-leash dog park or dog area, or when the dog is within a vehicle. And we can also easily prepare a partial affirmative defense. I have in quotes. Basically, the idea there specifically for violations of the leash law is the penalty would be reduced on a case-by-case basis if the dog's keeper, at the time they get the citation, shows the animal control officer that the dog was under some strict voice control at the time that the citation was being issued. And so instead of going down the entire list of topics. I'd love to get some specific direction and then move on to the next one. And happy to answer any questions on some of these issues, but our animal control officer or Miss Simon on Zoom might be in a better position to weigh in.
So you're asking the council to ask questions up
About the leash
through-
law.
About the leash law and leave the public nuisance stuff, which is on the next page, to a later discussion tonight, right?
Yeah. Let's just go one at a time. So starting with number one, there's 5 sort of main topics.
Right.
The first is leash law. The second is the number of adult dogs allowed on the premises. The third is dog licensing. The fourth is impoundment. And the fifth is dogs as public nuisances.
Okay, right now, you just want questions about the leash law, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Direction, really, not just questions, hopefully.
Mr. Mayor,
That's Councilor Runyon.
I'm real curious to have our guest on the Zoom call speak and the officer to speak before we go into our own questions and whatnot. That might be
Calling them because I have questions and I was hoping they can answer them.
okay. Just one thought, maybe not everybody's.
Do you have any opening comment you want to make, or you just want to respond to questions? Jake?
I'd like to respond to questions, please.
Okay. How about Ms. Simon?
I think the issue with the leash law is it's a control issue. And what's happening now is because there are so many dogs at large, the shelter is completely overburdened. We're having a hard time, fulfilling our obligation to have 4 police kennels available. And what I would like to see is somehow through this process, we get back to servicing the community as far as hardship owner surrenders. We're just so inundated with strays that we are not able to take in owner surrenders and service the community like I feel we should, because we're so busy with people and their off-leash animals, that we cannot get back to why we're really there, which is to provide a service to the community. Additionally, all the lack of control or lack of leash law is just adding to the overpopulation at the shelter and in the city. And so what I would love to see is some sort of leash law that works for everyone. Obviously, a dog at large is not on a leash or is not in control. I do realize that some people have their animals trained and they're able to be off leash and they're not bothering anyone and they're not at large. I feel like also an e-collar, a collar that vibrates, that alerts the dog that you'd like them to stay by your side or to come or to whatever it is also a good form of control and could be considered an alternate or an alternative for a leash. But ultimately, what I would love to see is just some sort of compromise on the leash law. And I get it that some people are not going to like it. But yeah, I think that we'd all be better off with some sort of solid rules for what is or a solid definition of what is an animal that's under control.
Could you explain how not having a leash law affects the number of dogs you have at the facility?
Well,
specifically,
because there are so many dogs at large that animal control is having to bring in. For instance, yeah,
okay.
because there's I think, I don't know what happens out there. From what what it looks like is that people just open their door and let their dogs out in the, I don't know. I don't know what they're doing, but they're not controlled. And we're getting them in. And what happens is a lot of people can't afford to pay the $50 a night that it costs to house your dog. Or they don't call in within the 3 days, and then, all of a sudden they've racked up $200 in overnight fees. Yes, we work with them because we want dogs to go back home. We don't want to overburden the shelter, but it's a process to get them back, if we can at all, to their homes.
Yeah, it sounds like a very serious problem. Do you have any numbers on the number of dogs that fall in that sort of a category throughout, say, over a 1 month or 1 year
I
period
can
of
tell
time?
you that this week we have had 8. Just this week.
Is that typical? 1 a day, say?
It's typical that if we get 2 adopted out, 3 come in. It's a hamster wheel.
Mhm.
But we have to get in a position where we can get caught up.
So in your opinion, a leash law would dramatically decrease the number of dogs that are brought into your facility
I do.
because they won't be strays?
I do.
Okay. Any comment on that, Mr. Jake?
Yeah, to kind of answer your question earlier, like you first asked. So kind of a scenario that you're kind of looking at. So I've had it when I've been out and about where owners open the front door of their house just to let their dog go potty. There's no fencing, nothing to keep the dog from wandering. I've had multiple times where I'm trolling down a road and I see a dog wandering down the sidewalk. Um, Dogs are pretty smart and they go back home every once in a while, but I'll follow dogs all the way back home and the owner's like, "Oh, I thought he was just out in the front yard." Um, Not totally watching their dog. They just kind of let their dog kind of roam and go where they want. So having that leash law, I feel like would help owners be more cognizant and more aware of where their dogs are at, especially if they don't have any sort of confinement on their property. And especially if it's in the public right of way.
Other questions on this? Counselor Richardson.
I was just going to comment rather that I think it makes good sense. It may be, in some people's opinions, too bad, but or frustrating. But then I look around and I see perhaps the majority of the people walking their dogs, walking them on a leash. So I feel like this is not likely to penalize sort of responsible or thoughtful or committed dog owners, dog folks. It may pinch people that are irresponsible or sort of laissez-faire in how they let their animals run, and I'm okay with that.
Counselor Runyon?
I didn't hear the last part of that.
I said I don't think this will pinch or hinder people who are being responsible dog owners. It may pinch people who are irresponsible dog owners,
God bless you.
and I'm okay with that.
Agree. I have lots of people walking by my house all the time, and the dogs are on leashes, and those are the responsible ones. I like dogs having the ability to roam and whatnot, but it can be a real mess, so to speak, at times. Also, what Ms. Simon talked about, that it's becoming a real burden on the Humane Society, for whatever their actual name is these days, for not only dogs that are picked up by law enforcement, but people that are choosing to say, "I can't take care of my dog anymore. Here you go." And they simply don't have room for this anymore. So then what's the alternative? Then they pack the dog back up in the car and drive down the block and open the door, and we have more dogs at large. So I think leash law is good, a good idea. I think the alternative, if when they're coming in for a license, which we're going to talk about that in a second, that would be an alternative, that they can prove they have an alternative that's appropriate, the electrified collars or whatever they're called. I think that's a good alternative, gives a little more leg room to the owner of the animal and so forth. And that can be a good thing. I've seen that work. But I've also seen where a dog was gone for several hours trying to find it, and finally they're tracking it on their phone. But in the meantime, you know, in the case I know about, the dog was a very friendly, good dog, but it may not always be that case. But I think giving a leash law with alternatives to more modern methods is an idea that we can explore. Maybe we have that initially in there and see how it goes over the next year or two. But a whole bunch of that is going to be related to if we are going to enforce or not enforce the dog licenses, because how would we know they have electric or, you know, electrified devices to keep track of their pet unless we have some way of checking that box when they come in for a license? Would be one idea. I don't know if that's a good one, but or if it happens, the dog is out there and the owner says, well, I've got it, but the battery must have died. You know, I don't know what the answer is there, but we ought to give people an alternative to leashes. But in general, leash law, I think, is just as Councilor Richardson said, those that are abiding by those kinds of rules are probably the vast majority already. So, and no matter what rule or rule we do, or in any event on any item, not everybody's going to like what we do, but this is one I think it's a matter of public safety too, as well as the safety of the dog. So I'm in favor of a leash law.
Anybody else? Councilor Ring?
Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm curious. I don't disagree with a leash law generally speaking, but I think that it's going to be important to note that there's two questions. One, where would a person be able to take their dog and throw a ball, right? So I take my dog. I have been negligent the last like 2 or 3 weeks, but I've notoriously take my dog out and throw a ball because I can throw a ball a heck of a lot longer off my property than I can on. So I'd be curious to know if there's recommendations or a discussion later on for additional dog parks. Conveniently, there's one located in my neighborhood, but they're few and far between. The second question that I have is, like, how's it going to pinch somebody that's not abiding by a leash law? Like, what's the potential penalty, right? Where's the where's the enforcement piece to give people the excuse me, the word's escaping me, to have incentive to use a leash or put up a fence around their property. That's the other piece that I'm curious about.
Okay, Councilor McLaughlin?
Well, in my discussions in town, and I've talked to many responsible dog owners that have owned dogs for many years in our city. And what they're telling me is that going to Cirrhosis Park, they have a collar, an e-collar, and that dog is under control. So it seems logical that we could maybe include that in some type of provision, that the e-collar is another alternative to having a leash.
Right.
However, the bottom line is being able to control the dog and to prevent any type of either attacks or, you know, maybe intimidating people walking by, or that's the purpose behind it, that. We want to prevent dogs at large. And how do we do that? And we have to give you enough enforcement to be able to pick up those dogs And then once they go to the Humane Society, if there's not capacity there, we do have a bottleneck that I'm hearing about as well, because there's some concerns that I was told today, in fact, that a couple, a father-daughter were walking and found a dog that was visibly old, ill, and they picked it up and called the society, but they were rejected mainly because of that. And what do they do with that dog? And they were faced with that dilemma. Fortunately, the dog didn't live much longer, but that's one of the conditions that we have, is that you want to treat animals humanely, and you want to have something maybe at the Humane Society, or now I don't know, do they have I know that euthanasia is not employed, but there must be times when they send a dog to a vet, or if they have the capability of putting an end to a dog's life at the society. I don't know what the current policy is. I know that that has changed over the years, but I think that is probably one of those items that we don't like to talk about, but is necessary in order to maintain some type of control over the issue. And those are things that they will have to discuss to keep the bottleneck in at least the amount of dogs so that we can service, so that you can take animals that you find to the Humane Society to be processed, either to find homes or some type of management. Those are the things that I've learned about. There have been some complaints about instability of our Home at Last Humane Society, and knowing where to go to get a license. That's another issue that came up. Who do you go to? Oh, do we have a license in the Dalles? Yes, we do, but it's not enforced. I guess that would be one thing. It's not enforced, and there's confusion on where to go. At one time, you could get a license from a veterinarian. So it's, where do you go to find it? There's a lot of inconsistencies that really need to be adjusted and accounted for. And I think that's what you're asking for. And I think that's what probably you're asking for at the Humane Society, is some guidelines to be able to manage this problem.
Yep. Mr. Mayor, I just want a number of these issues that Ms. Simon and Jake and Councilor McLaughlin are raising are certainly very important issues. And I think we'll have plenty of opportunity to address each and every one of them as we progress, maybe even tonight. But you'll have to forgive me, Councilor McLaughlin. What was your position on the leash law? I'm just trying to keep my notes.
I'm in favor of having a control of the animal, which by leash or by electronic collar, that seems reasonable. Or when you're at the park and you're throwing a bar, it still has the potential, but the problem is enforcement. A person will say, you go up and say, well, your dog ran, but he was under my control. I can give him directions or instructions, come. It would have to be some kind of physical, either electronic or a leash. I don't know if voice commands is control. That's my own feeling. So I would like to see some viable means of constricting a dog's movement.
I would just like to add my 2 cents. I would make the note that this is a multi-partner effort. Obviously, we work with Columbia Gorge Humane Society.
Correct.
Thank you, Ms. Simon and the Columbia Gorge Humane Society. Thank you for your partnership and your work, and also Wasco County has a role to play as the statutory responsible party to have a county animal control program. Obviously, there's going to be some partnership there, and we may well need to bring the Parks District into conversation for the good of the order, the good of the community, and see about the viability of a second dog park. Those seem like a pretty reasonable thing to have in a larger conversation. We're not going to solve it all by ourselves.
No. Question, do we have a dog park now?
Yes,
Yes,
Okay. Just one?
correct.
it's probably about double the size of this room, maybe. It's right by the fire station on the east side where Counselor Ring and I both live, and Counselor Richardson. And I don't think I think there are plans for a new dog park, but knowing the park district and in my informal discussions with the director, I would not count on any additional dog park as far as the park district goes for a long time.
We may need to see if we can expand or lean into that conversation a little bit,
Yeah.
but not tonight. That's not.
Well,
Not appropriate.
following up, and this is something Counselor Ring brought up, I'm sure all of us have experienced walking or driving by a school or a park and seeing people using one of those chuckets or throwing the ball like Mr. Ring and seeing the dog run 50 yards or so to get the ball and bring it back. I mean, I'd hate to penalize owners for not having a leash on their dog and not only having one, which I think is kind of an inadequate dog park, and penalizing people for taking their dogs to the park or to a school. I've seen this kind of activity at the middle school a lot. I've seen it behind Dry Hollow School. I've seen it over at John Chenoweth at the school there on the track, the football field. So I have no problem with a dog or a leash, but I really have a problem penalizing people if there's no other suitable place to take a dog and throw a ball. I mean,
So, Mr. Mays, as Councilor Richardson mentioned, it's a community, right? And the city happens to be the geographic place where this community resides, but we have partners that you've listed, the school district and the Parks District and the county, Kramer Fields, and up at Cirrhosis, again, with the Parks District. All of those properties that you listed are not owned by the city of the Dalles. And so these are private property for the most part. They could also be public in a sense that they're owned by a public institution, but certainly, as the owners of this public property, the school district or the Parks District or whoever, if they want to prohibit dogs from being on leashes or off leashes, I think we would all agree that that's their right. But maybe somebody else might know this. Does the Parks District, do they have any rules that speak on whether dogs are or are not allowed, or are they just silent?
Yeah, they do. I was told today that Cirrhosis Park, our largest and biggest park, has signs posted that dogs are to be on a leash. Maybe that's
So maybe once upon a time, when the city and when the Parks District was effectively part of the city and the city owned all the parks in the community, it might have been a different story. But whether there are dogs on or off leash at parks that are managed or owned by the Parks District, frankly, is a conversation for the Parks District to have.
right.
And if the community feels like we need additional dog parks, I mean, they probably don't feel that way because I don't believe any of those parks that don't allow dogs have any enforcement of a leash law because there isn't really a leash law. So maybe a way to think about this as counselors for the city of the Dalles is, if the city, for example, adopts a leash law, that might start the dominoes. And maybe the last domino to fall would be some community-wide changes because when, if the city starts enforcing a leash law, there might be some additional demand from the public to have these parks converted or otherwise available for off-leash dog activities.
It'd be useful to just include some language when we come back around to looking at voting on an ordinance. It might be useful to include some language that has some of these exceptions carved out.
Yep, I have it. I have a draft I've been
you.
working on for a few months. The exceptions for running at large, when a dog is a public nuisance for running at large. And at large is, by the way, when it's off premises and not within the keeper's control. That's what it currently is. But under the new draft ordinance, at least as drafted, it includes, control means on a leash. We have exceptions for that too. The exceptions are within a vehicle and there are two exceptions from state law dealing with when the dog is legally being used to legally hunt. It's arguable whether that's allowed in the city limits or not. And then the other more broad exception would be whenever the dog is within a designated off-leash area, a lawfully designated off-leash area or dog park. And so, there is some room for growth, even if at the time that council adopts that ordinance, there's only one dog park that allows off-leash activities. The way that it's drafted would be open so that if, for example, the Parks District one day says, hey, this part of cirrhosis is off leash or whatever, it would cover that too.
Counselor Runyon.
I just wanted to add that I'm in favor of all the things we've talked about here, and Councilor Ring talking about throwing a ball, finding a place to go do that and whatnot. There has to somehow be exceptions built into the whole leash law thing, I guess, for dogs that are under control and they got to go play. And a lot of families have a lot of great enjoyment by that. And that's why I'm glad this is only a discussion, and that what we're really looking for, and we don't have a lot of public here today, but we're not in a big hurry to pass anything, as I understand it, and we're wanting public input, pro, con, in the middle, different ideas. The more the media can help us get that word out, and the talk show like you're going to be on tomorrow, and get the cards and letters coming in is a good thing.
Counselor McLaughlin.
Couple suggestions just to throw it out because we're talking about ideas. The Riverfront Park on the eastern area is basically unused. And if that could be used perhaps for development of a dog park, that's a possibility. Also off from the Riverfront Trail, I know this has been discussed in the port, owns that property. I keep hearing about liability and about issues around that. And so those are two areas that are large, that are remote, that possibly could be developed as an alternative. I just wanted to throw that out.
Mr. Mayor, if now's an okay time, I had an opportunity to look at some other cities.
Yes, I was going to ask about that.
And so I have some statistics I can share with council if this helps inform any of this. And I have information about, well, I think nearly all of the points that I hope to get through tonight. But on leashes, let's go down the list. The following cities require leashes in some form or another. And I'll go down and sort of give you a little brief overview. For Baker City, leashes are required. There are no exceptions. However, the city does seem to have dog parks where dogs are allowed off of leashes. I'm not so sure how that works, but there are no exceptions in Baker City Code.
Well, if it's a dog park, you don't need a leash.
Well, I know how it works in reality, but the code doesn't reflect that.
With respect, gentlemen, we have 5 points to discuss. You've heard from four. I would like to hear Councilor Randall's thoughts, but you have direction from 4 councilors. Go forth on the leash
Well,
law.
I'd like to hear.
You want to hear more about it?
I'll
even
go
though
quick.
We've already said
I don't think you need to get into specifics on every city. Just
All right, that's fine.
Tell us which cities have leash laws and which ones don't.
Sure. Baker City has a leash law. Hermiston has a leash law. Lincoln City has a leash law. Madras has a leash law. Newport allows voice control. But in the parks chapter of their code, dogs must be on leash in parks, except in specific designated off-leash areas. Pendleton requires leashes except for specifically designated dog parks. Roseburg requires leashes except in areas designated as public property off-leash areas. And Prineville requires leashes in the same way. And the city of Lebanon requires leashes except when dogs are off leash during obedience or field training under direct supervision of handlers. And so by and large, and I didn't just cherry pick those cities as the ones that actually every single city I mentioned has a leash law in some form or another, except for city of Newport. And so I didn't just cherry pick those. These are all very comparable cities as far as population goes to the city of the Dalles and regionally as well.
So no city that you surveyed is like us.
The only arguable one is, by the way, there's no city like the city of the Dalles generally, but specifically Newport, they do allow voice command except in parks dogs must be on a leash, except if the park is specifically open for off leash.
Could you explain, I think you said Roseburg and Prineville allow no leashes in public areas, something?
Yeah, so in Roseburg and in Prineville, leashes are required, except in areas designated as public property off leash areas. So,
Like a school or a park?
right.
Do any of those leash laws that you've researched, do they also include the modern versions, the e-collars, that sort of thing? Or do they need to be updated?
So I wanted to go down the list and tell you everything, but Councilor Richardson said.
Just that one item is all I'm asking about.
Yeah, so some of them have no exceptions. Some of them
Okay.
say leashes and that's it. And some of them are more progressive on that. I don't believe I did see any actually with electronic collars, to be honest. Yeah.
Some of the verbiage does speak to other means sufficient to prevent injury or escape.
Yeah.
The other question I would have, and I want to hear from Councilor Randall here too.
Well, I would like to hear from them too.
When after he's done, I would like to know what the Humane Society's is there a termination segment to a dog that's been kept a long time? I mean, or is innately vicious, et cetera? Is there some sort of euthanasia, or is it strictly a no-kill dog center?
No.
And we need to know that answer, I think, as well.
Let's hear from Councilor Randall. If you have anything to say, now be the time. After you comment, we'll allow Ms. Simon to answer Councilor Runyon's question.
I definitely think we need a leash law. In fact, I'm kind of surprised we don't have one already. I think with a robust set of animal control ordinances, including the leash law with the exceptions we've talked about, wouldn't only spark a demand from the public for, like you mentioned, Jonathan, public spaces, dog parks. It would also maybe encourage some of the people who have more casual approach to animal ownership to maybe reconsider, given that there may be some consequences of irresponsible ownership. So yes, I'm absolutely in favor of a leash law.
I'll put something together for council to review.
I'd like you to spend some time or pay particular attention to the Roseburg and was it Prineville?
Sure.
The public space. I, for one, feel that, I'll get back to my argument about dogs running around on middle school or at the Chenoweth football field or whatever. It's, yeah, go ahead.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, I think one way to think about this, and Jonathan, correct me if I'm simplifying it too much, but a leash law for the city of the Dalles would really focus on animals that are in the public right of way or who an owner lets out into their yard and wanders into the public right of way and has those chance interactions with other people walking their dog on leash, or they are walking their own dog in the public right of way. They believe that they have their dog under voice control, but we've all encountered, or many of us have encountered interactions where they really don't. And the dog comes running up to my dog and a fight breaks out immediately within a second. And in regards to other property owned by other agencies or entities, it would be their prerogative to permit dogs to be on that property without a leash or with a leash. So Parks and Rec can determine their own rules for their property, D21 likewise. So I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, that the city's ordinance would require D21, for example, to have dogs on leash on property they own.
That's absolutely right. And same would apply to, for example, Wasco County and Kramer Field. The city can help enforce other ordinances adopted by other entities. But otherwise, it's for all intents and purposes, private property that the county or the district opens for public use. So, right.
Good point.
Councilor Ring.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of my observations, and I'm wondering because we have a couple of folks I think that could answer this question. I think that the leash law is being looked at as a solution to a particular problem, and the problems that I heard brought up by our guests is that the Columbia Gorge Humane Society is running out of room, and I think the officer's statement about some people, some, owners with a lack of supervision or limited supervision of their animals when they are let out the front door, for example. Those are issues, and I don't immediately see how having a leash law is going to address those problems. So I would love to hear, or would like to hear, if they have suggestions on how it may. And I think the key to this is the enforcement piece, if I'm not mistaken. And I'd just like to say go Yankees, because
Okay, do you want me to answer that question?
Sure. And then-
So go ahead.
No, you go ahead, and then Jake can comment. Go ahead, Ms. Simons.
I don't know any other way but a leash law to sort of halt the burden at the shelter. I mean, the animals that we're getting in are not leashed, voice controlled, or e-collar controlled. They're just I think, like Jake said, I think they just open the front door and this is the dogs just start their day at large. I don't think they're ever on a leash. And it does need to be managed, and it does need to be enforced. And that's going to take some resources. But I don't see any other way. It's worse than I've ever seen it. I've been around for a while, starting with Home at Last, maybe 20 years ago. And I've been involved with the shelter off and on, and I've never seen it this bad.
Jake, do you have any comment?
Yes, I do. To address some things and concerns you guys have. So to give you more of a overview of why leash law would be appropriate. So most of all dog bites that occur in the city, I'd say probably between like 80 and 90% of the dog bites occur on two dogs interacting and getting into a scuffle. Owners tend, into adrenaline moment, reach down and try to break up the dog fight. During that dog fight, you can have the most controlled dog in the world, but that dog's going to end up defending itself. It's going to rely on its basic instincts. Either that dog or the other neighboring dog could end up usually biting the person trying to break up the dog fight. With that, it gives the owner more control over their animal and the other owner more control over their animal to pull away the dogs from interacting with each other. It's not much more of a, I would say, running at large, but more of a control over the animal itself. Because these are living, breathing animals that have a mind of their own. E-collars, for example, I highly recommend them. I believe they're a great tool. In the general sense, public safety, that dog's walking on an e-collar, a dog happens to be off leash coming towards that dog's going to get into a scuffle. It's not going to be listening to its owner. That owner is not going to want to correct that dog, because if he corrects that dog with that, it's a negative correction. Usually you use e-collars in a correction for a negative fight. So basically you'd be punishing your dog for fighting back and defending itself.
Not if both dogs had e-collars, though, that could be controlled by the owners.
Goodness.
But if it's a stray dog attacking one, I understand what you're saying there.
Mm-hmm. And like I said, I'd say example of an e-collar is our K9 officer for the county, Xena. She works amazingly on e-collar. I decoy for her, and I've seen it implemented multiple times to where on the recall she comes right back. But in general sense, there's two dogs to the situation.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
So I would just comment that I think there's general interest in a leash law, which I think is some of the direction that Jonathan and I and other staff need to invest more time and resources in the particulars of what a leash law would really look like, what some of the enforcement and penalty criteria may be. This is some of that direction we wanted to get at this discussion item before spending time and energy really fleshing this out. But what I've heard from the council this evening is that there's interest, and so we will move forward accordingly. And we can move on to the next one if you like.
Well, I agree that there is consensus, but I think the staff has to be, based on what Ms. Simons is saying, if we do have a leash law, it's going to increase Mr. Baker's workload dramatically. And I'm wondering, the staff should ascertain whether we have the resources to enforce this the way it should be enforced. That's all. So is there any objection to moving on?
No, no objection.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I definitely started with probably one of the more contentious of the five. I think the rest, I certainly don't think the rest will command just as much attention. Maybe not. Maybe more attention. Who knows? Let's find out. Number 2, number of adult dogs. Currently, the city has no numerosity limit for the number of dogs someone can have. I remember just anecdotally 3 or 4 years ago, former Mayor Wilcox had a situation where his next door neighbor had 19 bloodhounds. And I had to go to Mr. Wilcox's home to serve him with a subpoena, him and his wife with a subpoena to come testify in that court case here in our muni court. They invited me in, and I'll never forget the smell. The smell was beyond my descriptive abilities. And so there is no limit for the number of animals that you can have currently. Dogs, rather, adult dogs. We do have some animal limits actually very recently.
This would be for dogs over the ages of 6 months.
Yeah, dogs over the age of 6 months or dogs that have their canines fully developed. That's the standard for adult dogs under state law. Our animal control officer recommends no more than 4 adult dogs on premises and no more than 1 female dog kept for breeding purposes. And there would be no limit for their litter up to this age of 6 months or whatever they get their canines. If council does support having some limit, we can prepare a pretty straightforward amendment to this ordinance that would allow people who currently keep more dogs than that, whatever that is, to continue keeping those dogs. We'll have a very straightforward nonconformity section. Just very quickly, before I pass the microphone to whoever would like it, doing the same research on all of those same cities, I'll go down the list. The city of Baker City has a number, 4 dogs are allowed, but anything more than 4 can also be allowed if they get a special kennel permit. There's no limit in the city of Hermiston. There's no limit in Lincoln City. There's no limit in Madras, no limit in Newport, no limit in Pendleton. The city of Roseburg, for single-family dwellings, allows 4 adult dogs and their offspring, just like I recommended, or just like I stated in the staff report, not having a limit for their offspring. But in duplex or multifamily dwellings, it's 2 adult dogs and their offspring, again, up, any number up to the age of 6 months. And also no more than 1 female dog used for breeding purposes. All of that's in the city of Roseburg. So again, Roseburg, if you have a single family home, 4 adult dogs, duplex or multifamily, like a condo or an apartment, 2 adult dogs. No limit in the city of Prineville and no limit in the city of Lebanon.
Okay, and you're also suggesting that if we do support the idea of limiting the number of dogs, is that we can grandfather in those that.
Yeah. Inevitably, somebody will have more than whatever the limit is, unfortunately, yeah.
Okay, so the first question is, how do you guys feel about limiting the number of dogs? And if you do, how does the number 4, actually 4 and 1 female?
Well, so it's it's not or, it's 4 adult dogs and also no more than 1 female dog.
Right.
So it's not 5 dogs.
And how do you feel about those numbers? So, Councilor McLaughlin.
I agree with this policy, and 4 seems to be reasonable. Do we provide, what about like Dinah Doghouse? What about?
So there would be exceptions for groomers, right? Groomers keep more than 4 dogs, sometimes like the pink poodle downtown.
Vacationing.
Boarding dogs. There are definitely exceptions for that baked in. This is particularly for, homes where people live, right?
I agree with this and I rest my case.
Councilor Ring.
I'm not opposed.
Councilor Randall.
I think 4 is a reasonable number, but I think like the previous ordinance we discussed last session, maybe tie that in some way to like lot size, and like you mentioned with the duplexes, maybe limit it to 2 if it's duplexes. Tie it some way to the size of property or the types of property that we have these dogs on.
How do you guys feel about that? Limiting,
I can live with it.
Yeah.
We need to see it develop, though.
Counselor Richardson,
Agreed.
Counselor Runyon, okay.
Okay, well,
You have direction on that?
thankfully, yes.
Okay.
Right.
Let's end with dog
I'm
licensing.
kind of surprised that all those cities that have leash laws apparently don't limit the number of dogs, but that's just an observation. So
Yeah.
go ahead. Yeah.
Let's skip over dog licensing and maybe end with that. Jumping over to impoundment on page 40. This is number 3 on our list so far of 5. Number 3, impoundment. Currently, our animal control officer is authorized by our code to impound any dog that's running at large or found to be unlicensed. However, that's all it authorizes the animal control officer to do in those situations. Some proposed amendments to this ordinance would include expanding that authority to include impounding when they find a dog that's been abandoned off premises, and there's a definition for abandoned, is responsible for biting a person or another animal, which, it seems silly because it almost seems like that would be, inevitably the one reason why you would want to impound a dog, but it's not in our code. Or is unattended for any period of time while tethered or tied in or on a public right of way. I'll come back to that in a second. Going down to the next paragraph, currently our animal control officer is required, there's no other alternative, to take impounded dogs to CGHS for holding. And so some proposed amendments would be giving the animal control officer some discretion to return the dog to its keeper if the keeper is known. So Jake, I'm just gonna hazard a guess. You probably see some of the same dogs as like repeat offenders. You probably know, oh, this is Fido. Fido lives over there on 14th Street. What's he doing here on 12th? Currently, the code doesn't really allow you to take the dog back to the owner. The code tells you if you're going to do anything, you got to take it to CGHS. I feel like giving you the ability and the discretion on a case-by-case basis to determine, hey, I know Fido lives on 14th. I'm going to just go ahead and take him back to Bob or whatever. And I know Fido's a good dog. He just got out. I feel like that would be a welcome addition to your toolkit. And so that should result in some administrative efficiencies for both the city and CGHS to ease in the burden that Ms. Simon mentioned, while simultaneously being a benefit to the dog keepers so that, Ms. Simon mentioned, some of these fees they can rack up quickly. And so we could give the public an opportunity to avoid those by empowering our animal control officer with that authority. And then going back just to the paragraph right before that, I mentioned proposed amendments would be expanding the authority to impound when the animal control officer finds a dog unattended, but for any period of time while the dog is tethered or tied in the public right of way. And Jake, maybe you can give an example of, I think this came from one of your recommendations specifically with stop signs, if you want to.
Correct. So I've run into a lot of situations which dogs are tethered to stop signs, shopping carts, places that park benches to where they're tethered for 3 hours plus. Owner decides to go off and do whatever they do, and they leave these dogs tethered to these public areas. With that, I have no real ability to take such dog, general sense, and impound it. I believe I'd have the discretion enough, say, dog's tethered outside of a grocery store and waiting for its owner to come back out, right? I'd have enough. 15 minutes, that's perfectly fine. But when a dog's out there for hours on end with no water, no food, no shelter, and it's just tethered out there in the heat, I have no real authority to take the dog and impound it in a general sense. So having that ability to help get that dog out of a bad situation and hopefully find an owner later down the road.
So again, the gist of this is just expanding the ways that the animal control officer can effectively do their job, empowering them with some additional authority for impoundment, and giving them some discretion to make, the right call, as the case may be. And so long as, we'll have some standards in there.
Okay, does anybody have a problem including impounding when the animal control officer finds a dog abandoned off premise?
No. If you're asking, no, I'm in favor of empowering your discretion and making it into the ordinance as such. So I'm in agreement with what you've got.
I have one question, and I hesitate to add one more potentially lengthy topic, but I do think it would be worth considering in the, during the time when we're looking at an ordinance, what Jake's responsibilities and authority is with regard to a dog he might find in a hot locked car, windows rolled up. I know they're just regular people that will take it upon themselves to, to break a window or do something along those lines. I have no comment on that, but I do think it would be useful to provide direction to Officer Baker what's appropriate and what's allowed.
Jake, the first thing that comes to mind is that one case where the special DDA, Jake Kamens, came into town and prosecuted for criminal negligence for the dogs. It was a hot car. There was
Oh, the
like,
hot
there was
car,
like
yes.
4 or 5 dogs in it.
Correct. It had
3 of them.
five
What's
dogs,
that?
5 rat terriers.
5 terriers, and 3 of them went to CGHS. And then there was a big bill at the end of it. And they were held as evidence throughout the duration of that case. It was a criminal case prosecuted in Wasco County Circuit Court. Animal abuse cases, which is leaving your dog in a hot parked car at a 110-degree day, that's certainly animal abuse, and it was prosecuted as such.
So that situation's already taken care of,
Covered by the criminal statutes of the state.
Then I withdraw my thought on that. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
How do the rest of you feel about the impoundment thing?
In agreement.
I'm generally in agreement with it, and I think, again, I'll just echo my concern about enforcement and, what our current code allows Officer Baker to do to take care of this sort of situation already.
Okay.
I think this may be one of those provisions that actually may generate some efficiencies because you can return the dog to the house couple doors down versus bringing them all the way down to CGHS and then processing from there. So that flexibility is really key.
Yep.
Especially if we are better about enforcing licensing, I would think that there would be a more efficient way for Officer Baker to make that determination and potentially return the animal to their owner more expeditiously than taking them to CGH. I think
It's almost like an informal path.
makes sense.
Right. In cases where the dog's owner is known. Right. Okay.
You feel you have direction on this one?
I think I do. Yep. Number 4 out of 5 is right underneath that, still on page 40 of 41, public nuisance. And so currently under our code, our dogs are a public nuisance if they chase people or vehicles off premises, if they damage or destroy property of somebody other than its keeper, if they scatter garbage or trespass, if they disturb people by continuous annoyance. And that phrase came from our animal ordinance. We have that in here too. And currently, again, if they run at large, or if they are what's known as a potentially dangerous dog, but not a dangerous dog. And I promise you that is the standard. Again, it is that the dog is a potentially dangerous dog, but not a dangerous dog. Both terms are defined by the state. And so some proposed amendments would be.
Before you get to that, does anybody here have, want to take something out of what we currently do? Or can we, or are you?
All of these, so let me be clear.
Yeah.
All of the ones that I just mentioned are, let me just be very careful before I say this, because I want to make sure I'm accurate, and I can be very accurate. Just give me half a second. Dogs at large, chasing, damaging persons or property, damaging property of persons other than its keeper, continuous annoyance, garbage, if they scatter garbage off premises, and potentially dangerous dog. Those first 6, these are all set by state law. They are already public nuisances by state law.
Okay,
We've
so-
adopted them into our code, but those are the 6 that are state law required.
Okay, so we have little choice, so we have to leave those in, right?
Those are the ones that are going to be the law no matter what we do. And so the next 6 are some other options, well, some additional options. So some proposed amendments to that provision would include dogs as a public nuisance when, and this ties back to what we were talking about two items ago, when the number of dogs that are kept on the premises is found to exceed the number that council allows, in which case each extra dog exceeding that number is a separate offense. So this would tie into whatever the limit is that council would like. So I think I heard 4. So if somebody has 5 dogs and they don't have the nonconformity in check that we would include, then this would be a public nuisance.
So if they have
yeah,
6,
Mhm.
that's
2 charges,
all right.
two counts.
Right.
Yeah. Number 2 would be, and this is in alignment with council's recent adoption of the animal ordinance. If the dog escapes on premises confinement at least 3 times in any 12-month period. Number 3, if a dog is found abandoned off premises. Number 4, if a keeper fails to maintain their premises in a sanitary condition. Again, this is very much copy pasted from the animal control ordinance. Number 5, if same from the animal ordinance, if their carcass remains on public property for more than 24 hours from the time that its keeper knew or should have known about its location. And number 6, if a keeper does not immediately remove, then appropriately discard their dog's feces when they defecate off premises. Very quickly, going back to my list of cities, just talking about waste, Baker City has a requirement to pick up dog waste. Hermiston considered a public nuisance if the owner or the keeper fails to pick up waste immediately. Lincoln City, it's not mentioned in their code. The City of Madras, there is a requirement to pick up the dog waste. In the City of Newport, there's a requirement to pick up the dog waste, and there's an additional requirement that the owners of the property where dogs are maintained, generally, so people's personal homes and their private land, they must maintain their property in such a way that they remove their dog waste from their property at least once per week. Don't know how easy it is to enforce that. City of Pendleton, it's not mentioned. City of Roseburg, there is a requirement to pick up dog waste. The fine is $25 for the first offense and $100 for a second offense in the same year. City of Prineville, there is a requirement to pick up dog waste, and the City of Lebanon, there is a requirement to pick up dog waste. The City of the Dalles does not have that requirement.
Okay.
Really, I mean, we do in other ways. Nikki can go after people, and she has in the past, but this would make it more in the animal control officer's tool belt.
Okay, let's take them one by one. Number 1, number of dogs found to exceed the number 4 in our case. Any problem with that?
None.
Anybody? Okay, number 2, if the dog escapes confinement 3 times in a 12-month period, any problem with
No
enforcing that? Anybody? Number 3, the dog is found abandoned off premise.
How do we determine if it's abandoned?
So that's a great question. The definition that I have currently drafted and is certainly open to being adjusted. Abandoned means any dog left without adequate food or water for a period of over 24 hours, or any barking dog that lacks supervision for a period of over 3 hours. So if, there's a dog out there for 24 hours, no matter what, even if they're living like a prince, they're technically abandoned. But if there's a barking dog, if they have no supervision for a period of over 3 hours. And I think these can frankly be tightened up a bit. I think 24 hours and 3 hours are a bit generous in both cases. But, we can define it however council would like.
Jake, does that seem reasonable? 3 hours?
3 hours if they're barking.
Oh,
3 hours, I believe, is really generous.
Yeah.
Because I can get multiple calls with a dog that is tethered to a stop sign. Public is very informative on these kind of things. We have a very good public here for dogs. But yeah, I can receive multiple calls. 3, I believe, is too generous almost, because I want to be able to address the situation. I have to sit
what's
there.
reasonable for you?
I'd say an hour.
All right, I'm recommending an hour.
What about, I guess I'll just ask Jake to follow up. Jake, what about dogs that are not barking, but they're just in the public right of way? Let's say they're tied to a bench. How long do you think is an appropriate time before you would be allowed to cite the owner for public nuisance?
I'd say 4.
4 hours.
4 hours. Because I believe a dog should have access to water and food within that 4 hours.
So 4 hours instead of 24 hours. And again, my numbers were just sort of placeholders. So let me just write this down. So 4 hours in all cases, or 1 hour if their dog is barking.
Correct.
Okay.
And this is in regard to considering it abandoned.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, number 4, any problem with
No.
authorizing that they have to keep their premises in a sanitary condition? I think we have consensus on that too. Number 5, the dog carcass issue, 24 hours. You okay with 24 hours?
I would say maybe strike public. If your dog dies on my lawn, I don't want you leaving it there for 24 hours.
Oh, so that's a great.
Their premises.
No, that's a great point, actually. I can make this say a dog carcass remains off premises, and we define premises as being real property that the keeper can lawfully exclude others from. So that includes like your apartment or whatever. So let me go ahead and make, that's a great point. Let me make that dog carcass remains off premises, right? Okay, I'll take care of it.
Okay, and number 6, making people pick up after their dog. To me, this is a no-brainer.
Okay.
And I think the word immediately should be in there too.
It is.
Yeah, I know it is. I'm just saying, yeah.
Yep. Okay. If that seems to be the consensus of council, let's move on to number 5, dog licensing. The city has an annual dog licensing requirement, and it has not been enforced. Proposed amendments to this ordinance change that requirement to align with council's direction from amendments to the animal ordinance, which is, council might recall, 3 years, expiring every July 1st, more or less. And so I guess that would be the first part before we dive into the rest of it. Does council have any questions or concerns connected with the time of a license? I did some research on this. My paralegal Betsy put it together, indicating that most, if not all actually not all, most cities do have an annual. Some cities have higher, well, no, I'll get to that in a second. The city of Pendleton has a 3-year license, and it sort of syncs up. And the reason why 3 years makes sense here too, it syncs up with the how long the rabies vaccination paperwork lasts for. You have to get your rabies shots every 3 years. And so having a 3-year requirement sort of aligns with that. But at least one city, I'm trying to find out where it is. It's a, I'll have to find it here in a second. One city that I found has a one-time dog license. I want to say it's Hermiston, but I don't believe that to be true.
Yeah.
At any rate, so nearly all cities require them to be annual. Some cities, a minority of cities, would have 3 years, and at least one city I remember seeing had a one-time license. Might be Pendleton.
How many dogs are licensed in the city presently? Do we know?
It's I think it's less than 10.
Oh, geez. Okay, do we have more than 10 dogs in the city?
Yes.
Okay. Just checking.
Population estimate.
17,000 people.
Yes, thank you.
10?
I meant a dog
You
population.
said any population
I did
estimate.
not say any No, I did say that. Do you have a dog population estimate? I'm just curious. You don't have to.
Just an estimate.
Yeah.
I would say normally people have 1 to 2 dogs in every household. So if we have a population of 17,000 people, let's say double it.
We probably have like
6,000.
7,000 households,
Yeah,
6,000,
6 or
7,000
6 about,
households. So maybe an equivalent number of dogs is a realistic, maybe a little bit conservative estimate. Yeah.
So 33,990 don't have a license.
Correct.
Something like that. Yeah. It has not been enforced.
I think there's a distinction here between population and number of households. Just want to
Yeah,
emphasize
yeah.
that.
True.
So it's about probably, arguably, let's say 6,000 households, let's say 1.5 dogs per household, So, somewhere like 10,000, I think is a fair estimate.
Counselor McLaughlin.
I'm in favor of dog licensing. I'm also in favor of electronic by digital means. I did some investigation and there are applications that can easily manage this. And then any funds that come in would be dedicated to supporting Humane Society. So all of those funds would be directed towards them. Any fines and fees that would be associated could also apply to supporting dogs at Humane Society. So I think that that could give them some cushion and provide stability. So that's my recommendation.
Can I just sort of focus on the length of the license before we get to the rest
I
of it?
kind of, I feel yearly, but I thought about how do you verify the rabies shot? And that was a question that we discussed today in the fishing boat out on Drano, by the way.
Yep.
So that's where I'm getting my information, and these are dog owners.
Sure.
So-
So yeah, license for rabies inoculations, the paperwork is valid for 3 years, and that's handled by the local county health department.
Okay. So somehow fusing the county health department along with some digital, I don't want to put this on to another department or on codes enforcement or anywhere else. It should be, in my opinion, linked to the website, city website. People could go on, direct it over. I went on multiple cities today and that's how they handle it.
Okay, how do you feel about dog licenses in particular? Should we have them or not?
We should
So
require
Council
them.
Council McLaughlin has said yes.
Yes.
Required, and I think, as you said, tied to the inoculations that are needed for them. I think, I don't know, do they get them every 3 years, the rabies shots, or is that just a one-time deal?
Oh, no.
It's our understanding, and the city manager and the police chief and I and Miss Simon met with representatives from local veterinary offices here in the city limits, and they mentioned that rabies inoculations are required every 3 years.
And so this is where engagement with our local vets, placing some of those requirements or duties with our local vets in collaboration with the city and the Columbia Gorge Humane Society. They check for the rabies license or the rabies tag when they come in for service. So tying it to that 3-year period, I think makes a lot of sense. Potentially, an annual could be another option as well for a lower fee for individuals who may, not be able to afford a hypothetical higher fee for a 3-year period, but also balancing the administrative burden of checking those licenses. So there's some areas to explore here, again, with council's support for a licensing process. And this is where in years past, there's been information previously on the Home at Last website. Even the vets, were aware of it and had some history there, but through the transition and through some of the evolution of the Humane Society, some of this process was lost. And so there's a lack of that communication to our community about how you actually go about getting a license and what the process is and where you can go.
Agreed. That was the question.
Right. And a lot of it was placed on the Humane Society at the time, enlisting or requiring the assistance of vet offices within the city limits is beneficial as well.
We've had instability from that source, and that's why it came, and people weren't always following up on that, but.
Yeah.
Oh, I know. In our software that we just purchased for accounting for financial, it had many other applications within that. Is this possibly one of those?
So dog licensing is a whole industry.
Yeah.
And there are a number of different applications that are already being utilized by veterinary medical facilities in the city limits and elsewhere that have the capability to address the licensing as a component of the rest of the veterinary medicine software. And this was information that was shared with us by the veterinary medical facility representatives that attended that meeting. It seems like they have some capabilities already to do this. They're just sort of keeping that tab unused. And so maybe I should wrap up my portion of this and have council have a free for all, but I really just wanted some direction on annually versus every 3 years. And then we could talk about the rest, but let's just jump right in. It sounds like 3 years sounds good. Please, anybody jump in and stop me if I'm wrong.
I'm for 1 year annual.
Okay.
Let me do
One,
yeah,
at
one
least.
down the line. Tim is 1 year. Okay.
Ben?
I think optionally 1 year, but I think that 3 years would be better.
3 or 1?
3, and when you're done, I want to answer some of Mr. McLaughlin's items
Two.
as well.
Request
Few
denied.
differences.
Okay, let's get the consensus on the 3 or the 1. Scott,
I'll go for 3.
Dan?
I don't have an opinion on that.
Okay, I
And
think the
abstain.
majority, we'll have another shot at this, so let's draft it.
Let
for
me muddy the
3.
waters a little more. Is there any way, or should we be interested in requiring chipping?
Yeah, so that is a component of it's an option. So part of dog licensing is you get your license and you also get a tag. And the tag is supposed to be worn on the collar of the dog when the dog is off premises. And that's typically the requirement. We have an exception drafted, but it can be changed or we can add more. The exception would be if the chip, if the dog is chipped and the chip contains the keeper's information, like their name and their address. And so we have a chip reader. And if the chip would contain that information, then that might be an exemption for the component of this licensing that requires the dog to wear a tag. But that would be it. Yeah.
Counselor Runyon, did you want to interrogate or?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. I'm in favor of licensing. I'm not sure how we go about the coupling of it. I know when I had my last dog, we had a tag on his collar, and somehow that should be incorporated into licensing the dog, that the owner get some kind of identification so the officer who picks the dog up or whoever does can call the owners. I got called about my small dog playing shortstop up at Cirrhosis Park, about 8 blocks from the house, and he'd gotten out the gate, but they called me and I went and got him. He didn't have a hit either. So anyway, 3 years, I think I'm more in favor of that. Multiple dogs, I'm almost thinking there needs to be some kind of a discount. Now, I don't know what we're charging for fees. Are we charging, $10 a dog, or, I mean, we don't want to, I'm not in the business of just putting big amounts out there and all of a sudden it becomes unaffordable. And they already have 4 that they're not going to throw one away. So maybe it's a discount. As far as where the funds go is my main thing. While I do believe we are a partner, so to speak, with Home at Last because of enforcement and all the things that we do to take dogs out there and so forth, I would not go as far yet to give 100% because we're going to have costs involved here as well. And I think we need to make sure we know what our costs are before we make donations to Home at Last, although I do want to help them. And I think we have an obligation to do that because of the overcrowding and so forth, which is we're hoping to alleviate somewhat by what we're doing. But that's just something we have to look at, whatever the cost of that might be, because enforcement is something we don't know a whole lot about. We have not had effective licensing because we don't enforce it. The other thing I'd like to see here on the end of that first paragraph, it says we also included reduced fees for the licensing spayed and neutered dogs and for dogs kept by an elderly person. We need to define what elderly is.
65 years of age or older.
1 year older than me. And a fee waiver for guide or service dogs for the visually impaired. Great. I would like to see a veterans discount added in there as well.
Agree with that.
Something council can absolutely do. No problem. I can include that.
Thank you, Counselor Runyon.
Yeah. Let me just finish reading this and then I'll stop being annoying about it. I'll try my best to stop being annoying about it. Currently, our code requires these fictional dog licenses to pay the applicable license fee that has been established by Wasco County. It is a very peculiar provision that we are requiring people to pay something that's set by another entity. I think this is just a holdover from a different era. Proposed amendments to this ordinance would change that requirement to reflect the city council's license fee, which would be part of the annual fee schedule. It's not really a new fee in that sense, but it's certainly a fee that's set by council. And then the reduced fees and the fee waivers that Councilor Runyon just mentioned. I mentioned this a few times now, but Matthew, Tom, and I met with Miss Simon and some members of the veterinary community to collaborate, to refresh and rehash and fully establish dog licensing in the city of the Dalles. So some proposed amendments to this ordinance would require these vets to, number one, inform their clients at or during the time of each dog's visit to that facility of the city's dog licensing requirement. This would require vets to do that and to either require that person to apply for the license at that facility, or to tell us the names and addresses of those people who don't apply there, so the city can follow up by mailing them an application in a small letter. And number three, it would require the vets to collect and remit the applicable fee, whatever the case is, to a city designated facility, for example, CGHS. And so this program would be intended to support CGHS's operations by providing it some consistent funding streams. It does not need to be all of it, or maybe it can be all of it in the cases of those who register for the dog license at a veterinary facility, and maybe those go to CGHS. I mean, it's whatever the council wants. I'm just brainstorming here aloud. And maybe the ones that are handled directly by the city, or that are processed by the city, would be going into the city's coffers. And finally, the proposed amendments would also require the animal control officer, who is primarily responsible for enforcing dog licensing, to make educating any person who's suspected of violating the licensing provisions about this chapter's existence, because there's going to be a steep learning curve. And there's going to be a bunch of people that have no idea this is happening. But that will fade pretty quick. And so, but the primary, council would be basically, commanding the ACO in this sense, legislatively, to make education of this chapter's existence the primary enforcement method as their initial method of enforcement, and to solicit their voluntary compliance. So there's that protection built in there too. So we're not trying to, catch anybody off guard with violations, but we also need it done. So I think this is a really healthy balance, but that's it for me.
Okay. Do you feel you have direction on everything that you need direction on?
I got the years. That's good. Sounds like city council's open to setting the own fee for their own licensing, which I hope is good. I'll add an exception in addition to the reduced fees for licensing spayed and neuter dogs, and for elderly people, and for no fees for service dogs for the visually impaired. I will also add something for veterans to have a reduced fee. Council will set all of these reduced fees by the fee schedule, which I think we will bring back in June as like a mid-year update to include a number of different fees that we haven't included historically. So that's good. On the issue of the veterinary medical facilities, so we envision, I think, requiring these vets offices to do this work, or to tell us who doesn't sign up so that we can help do this work. I think we'd also expect CGHS would probably empower the Humane Society with the authority to issue licenses, and to explore what that really realistically looks like, whether that includes tags or otherwise. And I think the city would have, certainly our work cut out for us, but I think this is the way to start this process. It's not going to be simple, but it should be straightforward. We have a pretty clear objective if council wants this, and less than 10, I'm not exaggerating. Tom, do you still remember the number when you told it to us last year? It was less than 10. I thought it was like 8. 214 dogs have been licensed in Wasco County in total, right?
So you're not proposing that licenses be sold here at City Hall?
No, I am. Yeah, there would be a component where you get a dog license by the city.
Okay.
Get your dog license by the vet. Get your dog license by the Humane Society. All the different contact points that the city or other officials or veterinary offices have with dogs and their keepers. Yeah.
Well, I'd be interested to see if there's more outrage over the leash law or the fact they have to get a license. Okay, Councilor Richardson.
Thank you. Jonathan and Matthew and staff, and clearly there's been a lot of work that's gone into researching the issue, and I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. The other 4 points that you've raised tonight are a slam dunk in my view. We have a dog problem in the Dalles. in my opinion, or whether we have a problem with irresponsible people who let their dogs be loud, loose, or dangerous. I have just one question on the licensing, and that is, what's the benefit? Why
Yeah.
dig into a licensing program
So
at all?
licensing has a number of different advantages. First, I guess, firstly, right, the city's police powers, public health, safety, and welfare. It protects the public health because basically the only criteria for whether you are eligible for receiving a license, other than paying, the fee, is presenting a valid certificate of rabies inoculation. And so it's a mechanism to ensure that people are vaccinating their dogs against rabies, which is a critical public health issue. It also helps lost pets get home if they're out and about and there's no license associated with them. They don't have a tag, they don't have a collar. It helps identify and return pets to their owners. And it also helps distinguish between stray dogs and pets. And so really the only real way to know that with any certainty is whether that dog has a tag or in some cases an electronic chip. It funds local community services that are essential, frankly, to any city, like having sufficient animal control and a local shelter. It encourages responsible ownership. People that license their dogs are more likely to comply, frankly, with other important practices like leashing, spaying and neutering. It helps law enforcement and emergency response in responding to complaints or attacks. A dog license is basically the legal proof that you are the dog's keeper. Oftentimes, and I don't really know how they address this now, but like, let's say somebody's dog is up at home at last and somebody comes in off the street and says, "Hey, you got my dog," and oh, there it is. And I'm sure there is a way. How do you show that you are the dog's owner without a license? Because you could just be the neighbor or somebody who just saw that dog and just wants it. So these are just a number of the different reasons why dog licensing, I think, is very sensible. In addition, counties, and you mentioned this earlier, Councilor Richardson, counties, there's 36 in the state, they are required by the state to have a dog control program. Cities are not required to have dog control. But if a city who's an incorporated city who adopts its own dog control program has a dog control program, and the city of the Dalles certainly does. Otherwise, Jake's out the job. We would depend on county enforcement in the city limits, which I don't think would be a very good thing for this community, because I think this community is special, frankly, when it comes to that, as opposed to the rest of unincorporated Wasco County. If the city adopts its own dog program, which we did, a component of that dog program is having a license. And frankly, it's probably why our code says it, but it hasn't been put into practice. And so I'm delighted to hear that council supports a license. You all don't really get to choose that. The state says if a city has a dog control program, it must have a license. Whether that license program is fully fleshed out and funded and has the tools to succeed is up to the council. But technically, we must have a licensing program.
Okay, Councilor Richardson, did you have any other questions?
I had just the one.
Okay, anybody?
If I can just make
Sure.
one final comment, I think the partnership with Columbia Gorge Humane Society is critical to that. And similar to transient room tax and transient lodging tax, I'm going to emphasize Columbia Gorge Humane Society as the name of the entity that we're partnering with, not Home at Last. I know it's a tough habit, but when we were looking at how to provide service to this community during that transition from Home at Last to Columbia Gorge Humane Society, we were looking at communities an hour away to help provide the services that we need for the constituents here. And so I want to emphasize that partnership and how we can support the Humane Society is a critical piece for that. Not only for, just the general services that we need, but if someone's dog is at large and picked up and brought over to Cascade Locks, that pet owner would have to travel that way to go get them, for example. And so having this entity here in our backyard in this community is critically important. And there's a lot of entities, a lot of communities around the state facing a lack of these services and the failure of some of these organizations. So I want to thank Sunny for being here this evening and for that partnership, and this license program and the component is a part of that partnership.
Okay, any other comment? Yes, would you like to say something, Ms. Simon?
I would. I just want to bring up one more component to the licensing thing, just to think about, and that is that when you get a license in Wasco County, you have to have a rabies vaccination. And for the same reason we're having animals not picked up, strays not picked up, it's a financial burden. And to actually go in and get a rabies vaccination so that you can pay your money to get a license, you have to pay an office visit to the vet, plus the cost of the vaccination, which I think is $60. So this is more, even if we keep the price at $18, it still will be, will be a certain percentage when we talk about how many animals are not licensed in the county. There's a lot, because a lot of people can't afford to get a license. They can't afford the vaccination. They can't afford to go to the vet. They can't afford basic vaccinations for their animals.
I think that's something the council, just to interrupt Mr. Mays, something for the council to consider, if the city's going to be put in a position to, weigh every single person's financial, portfolio or how much money they have, it's going to be a huge administrative challenge. I think arguably these are very low barriers. Having enough money to afford a visit to the vet is probably a good indicator that you are able to care for an animal. I just want to put that out there for council to consider. Arguably, if you can't afford, something like a standard veterinary visit, which is certainly expensive, you probably should reconsider maybe having an animal. I just think it's a public health issue, right? Rabies, there is no cure. It's deadly. And so it will kill humans and animals alike. Just wanted to mention that for council to keep in mind.
Okay,
Just one quick one.
Council McLaughlin?
We have community cleanup. We have community things that happen. Is there a way, does it require a vet to administer the vaccine? It does by law?
Does not require a doctor of veterinary medicine. There are, it's all handled by the state, and the state authorizes technicians to administer the rabies vaccine. You do not need to be a doctor. You could be a vet tech.
Perhaps we could organize a community event where the vets would pool together and administer for free, getting rabies, and then giving the certificates. That's a possibility.
Absolutely.
I just throw that out.
Good suggestion. Okay, any other comments or questions? Okay, now that we've been through this, what is the staff's recommendation on timetable? Are we looking at June or July, May? What?
This year or next year?
So, I mean, it's up to Matthew ultimately.
I think it's going to be June of this year at the earliest, considering April agenda is April 28th is packed. There's one meeting in May. I mean, we could try and shoot for May, but we'll see.
No,
I'd
I
rather
think,
set June.
yeah, we're in no hurry. I mean,
we're in no hurry, although I think we would like it, in a dream world to align with the introduction of the city's animal ordinance, which is slated to take effect on July 1st. I think no matter what, we're going to have a media run where we advertise this to the public, right? Special notice of tonight's meeting was sent out to all the stakeholders we could think of, including Ms. Simon, and the municipal judge has a family health issue. And so regrettably couldn't be here tonight, but I've been collaborating with him and he has weighed in on the development of the ordinance. And we also sent notice of this meeting, especially to the veterinary offices here in the city. Yeah.
okay. Thank you, Ms. Simon, for all your input. And Officer Baker, nice job. Thank you very much, too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both for your work.
Thank you.
Okay. The City Council of the City of the Dalles will now meet in executive session pursuant to ORS 192.6602D, which allows the council to meet in executive session to conduct deliberations with persons designated by the City Council to carry on labor negotiations. Consistent with ORS 192.6604, representatives of the news media are not allowed to attend tonight's executive session and are asked to join all the other members of the audience to leave the room. No decision may be made in executive session. At the end of the executive session, we'll return to open session and welcome people back. We expect to return in approximately 10 minutes. Okay, we're opening the session again. Counselor Randall, do you have a motion you'd like to make?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to authorize the city manager to execute the bilingual pay addendum with SEIU effective May 1st, 2025, contingent upon SEIU approval.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Do you have a motion you'd like?
Mr. Mayor, I move to authorize the city manager to execute the insurance MOU with SEIU effective July 1st, 2025, contingent upon SEIU approval.
Been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I just want to reiterate my intent to apply similar verbiage and standards regarding the health insurance premium shares between the city and employees for all exempt staff, mirroring what we're doing with SEIU and the police union. Thank you.
Ben and Scott and I met on-
Yeah, really.
Please.
Name and serial number.
Use the microphone.
Address. I'll do it again.
367 Summit Ridge Drive. Okay, Ben and Scott and I met about a month ago. I think I went over that with you guys. We discussed the process. What I have here is three folders for each of you. The first folder deals with our city manager. The second folder deals with our city attorney. And the third folder deals with our municipal judge. In each of these folders, you will see a self-evaluation, a blank form for you to fill out on their present job performance, and a copy of last year's performance evaluation. Okay. Well, there's also some salary information in here, which I asked Matthew to provide, which has information about salaries that the department directors are already earning and some salary schedule, or I should say survey from last year. Matthew, when I asked you to do that, did that include the 3% across the board? Do you remember? For those, or is it on here?
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. That was a while ago. I don't recall with confidence.
We'll have that information for you next Monday. Monday at 10 o'clock is when we meet, okay? All right. Any questions before I start?
So the wage table included in your packet tonight does include the 3%. So it doesn't have the individual, that information should have each department head's actual wage, their step, as the mayor's showing right there.
Yeah.
You can use that sheet and look on the wage table included in your packet this evening. And if the numbers match, it includes that 3%.
Okay. Anybody but me notice the difference in volume out there? There's sometimes here in our own microphones, not anywhere near like that.
No.
That was great.
All right, let me get my red pen out.
You're much better tonight because you talked,
Closer to it.
well, you talked directly to it. If you have it here, then you lean this way. talking to the
Yeah.
mirror.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We.
Oh, wow. Woof, 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 woof. Let's talk some more about chickens.
Mayor Mays, are we dismissed? Thank you.
You need to adjourn the meeting.
Not dismissed.
Okay, I'm gonna sit.
Oh. God.
Yeah.
Now, you will not see an evaluation for last year's municipal judge. No one can seem to find it, and our HR director apparently didn't leave very good files. So I do apologize. You will not see a 2024 performance evaluation for our municipal judge. I know. Okay, any last minute questions on this? Okay, 10 o'clock, Monday, April 21st. Do I hear a motion? Oh, I don't have to get a motion. Anything else? Okay, we're hereby adjourned. Thank you.
Yeah.
Leash laws in control.
What about leashes for chickens?
Vibrating collar. Less.
Waking dreams.
Those electronic collars are a
Dot
great
columns
idea
on all my
for
students.
certain individuals.
Yeah, go ahead. I was up at 5:15 this morning.
All righty.
Self-induced.